Well, hey, Fusion family, welcome to week 2 of this Connect group session as we as a group and we as a church are walking through the book Boundaries. So I hope that you had an opportunity to complete your reading and participate in the conversation tonight. Before we get into the conversation about the book, Connect group facilitators, please make sure that you've taken attendance for tonight's meeting. We believe that we have to count the things that matter to us, and so we like to take attendance, so make sure you've done that. The second thing, as a group, remember that every Connect group session, we want to make sure that we're participating in some kind of community service project that's decided on and agreed upon by the group. So I'd encourage you to go ahead and have some conversation at some point this evening around a way that you and your group can serve our community, can make the name of Jesus more famous in the communities where we minister, where we live, work, learn, and play. So take some time at some point before you leave tonight and discuss a community service project. Go ahead and start brainstorming some ideas about ways that we can get involved in places where we can work and serve. So have some conversation around that. With that, though, we are in this session going to be working through and talking through the book Boundaries. This week, you should have read through the first 6 chapters, 122 pages, so I hope you've had an opportunity to do that. If you're like me, when you read, I have a highlighter in hand. Every time I read anything that's nonfiction, I read with a highlighter in hand, and stuff that jumps out to me, I'll highlight it. If that's not a practice of you, maybe that's something you can try in the weeks following. But here's what I'm going to do. In just a moment, we're going to pause the video, and I'm going to ask that you go around the room, and every single person that's at your group, I want you to share with the rest of the group just one thing out of 122 pages that stuck out to you, that you found interesting, that impacted you in some way, and then share that with the rest of the group. And again, we want everybody to do that. This is an all skate. This is for everybody. Every person should have at least one thing that stuck out to them as they read this week. And then, so go around the room, spend some time talking about that kind of stuff. I'm going to ask you to hit pause. And then after that, I'm going to ask you to unpause the video, and I'll share with you a few of the things that I took away from this week's reading. So go ahead and hit pause now. I hope that you guys had some really great discussion around your takeaways from the book this week. I know that when I'm in my Connect group, what I hear from other people and things that stuck out to them, it helps me see it in a different light. And that's the value of why we do groups like this. That's why the discussion is so important. That's why it's important for us to be committed to being active in our reading so that we can contribute to the conversation. So I hope that was great for you. I want to share with you now just a few things that I found interesting out of this week's reading. Now, for me, I've spoken the last 2 weeks on Sunday mornings, and so I've shared with you already a lot of my thoughts and takeaways from the book. But I wanted to give you just a few things that stuck out to me. The first thing that I thought was really cool was on page 89 in the book. Is the law number 3 under the 10 laws about boundaries, and it was the law of power. And I know that for a lot of us, when we're bumping up against a boundary, or when we don't know where to have boundaries, or we feel like we're just kind of powerless. And so this particular section, it talked about how when we don't have power over a situation, what we do have is the power to seek some help. I thought that was really cool. Let me read you, it was number 2, the italicized number 2 under the law of power, where it says that you have the power to submit your inability to God. I thought that was really interesting. I think that a lot of times, maybe in the church culture that you grew up in, if it was anything like mine, I felt like we kind of had to hide a lot of the stuff that was wrong with us. That we tried to put on this, almost like this fake or this facade that we had everything together when we didn't. And I think that that's done a lot of harm inside of the church. And I think that what the authors are speaking to here is that, man, when we don't have it all together, what we do have is the ability and the power to seek the help that we need. They gave an illustration that I thought was pretty cool, just a couple lines down. It says, you may not be able to make yourself well, but you can call the doctor. The humbling of yourself commanded in the Bible is always coupled with great promises. I thought that was really cool. Like that for me is a big part of what I think is wrong with a lot of the church culture that I grew up in, and I think some of that still lingers on. We should be honest and open about the stuff that we're dealing with. When we feel powerless, we have the ability to seek the help that we need. I thought that was interesting for me. The other thing that was a big takeaway of mine was law number 6. Where it talked about the law of evaluation, and it talks about the considering of feelings, right? It says that every boundary that we set, every line that we draw in the sand, that we should consider the feelings of others. Those feelings just don't get to be the final say as to the boundary that we set or the things that we do. This actually kind of reminded me of something we read earlier back in chapter 2 on page 42. Where the authors said this. They said feelings should neither be ignored nor placed in charge. And the example that it gave in law number 6 was, hey, I need to set this boundary. I need to tell this guy no, or I need to take over for a person, but I know that's going to hurt their feelings. And then the implication there is that I don't want to do it because it's going to hurt their feelings. And I think what the authors are telling us, and I think the Bible leads to this as well, is that feelings don't get to be in charge. We shouldn't do things without considering other people's feelings, but feelings don't run the day. They don't rule the day. And I think that's something that all of us have to wrap our minds around. The last thing that I'll share with you was one of the myths that really kind of hit me in a different way. It was in myth number 2 in chapter number 6, where it said that boundaries are a sign of disobedience. That was the second myth. And this is something that I think all of us maybe battle with, is that we oftentimes will think one thing in our own mind and then say or do something different. That I really don't want to do this, but I'll say yes because I feel like I'm being disobedient, or if I don't, or I feel like I'll feel guilty if I don't. Again, I think that references some of the feelings stuff too. But a few things that I highlighted on page 108, and I'll just share these with you quickly. The author said that an internal no nullifies an external yes. God is more concerned with our hearts than with our outward compliance. In other words, I think what they're saying is, man, if we've already thought no in our heart, then even if we say yes, we're still not being obedient. We're still not, if we need to be saying yes and we don't want to, then we're still not really being obedient to God, because God doesn't measure our external compliance. God measures and cares about what's in our hearts. So if our hearts we say no, but then we act and say yes, we're not being true to ourselves, and it's the true version of ourselves that God sees anyway. What are we trying to hide, right? And I think the authors did a great job of pulling that out. They said this. They said, in other words, if we say yes to God or anyone else, when we really mean no, we move into a position of compliance, and that's the same thing as lying. I never thought about it that way. And the fact that they called it out really kind of hit me, that when I'm doing something that I don't want to do, my heart has said no, my mouth has said yes. That's a lie. I never really put that together, and I'm glad that they called it out. I hope that those thoughts are of some benefit to you. Maybe you had some similar conversation around the table or around the living room where you're sitting right now. And I really hope that as we continue to read through the book, that all of us have some great takeaways. Grab that highlighter when you read, highlight some stuff, come ready next week to share with the rest of your group your takeaways. Now, this week, we're going to be reading chapters 7 through 11, all about the different kind of relationships that we find ourselves in. So take some time, do the reading, highlight some stuff, and next week you're going to be challenged to do the same thing. We're going to go around the room and we're going to say, hey, tell the rest of the group something that stuck out to you. So come ready next week to share your takeaways from chapters 7 through 11. Hope you've enjoyed your time together tonight. Maybe you want to spend some additional minutes or time talking through some more about the book. Feel free to do that. Go ahead and come up with a plan for food next week. Have that conversation before you leave. And I pray that you guys have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you Sunday morning back at the YMCA at 9:30. Love you guys. We'll see you then.